Funding for this program is made possible by Burke Nursery and Garden Center in Burke, Virginia. You'll find trees and shrubs, perennials and annuals, water garden supplies, houseplants, and bird and gardening supplies. Burke Nursery also provides landscape, plant diagnostic, and installation services, and much more. For more information, you can check out their website or call 703-323-1188. Welcome to Gardening with Burke Nursery, the show where we help you grow your garden, increase the curb appeal of your yard, and share information on all plants. I'm your host, Misty Kuceris, the horticulturalist at Burke Nursery and Garden Center. As a child, grapevines brought images of fairies poking through the sky as the cluster of grapes peered down on me. I'd walk under the trellis, just amazed that there was fruit poking through those leaves. I'd watch my friend as she would pull the grapes off the vine and see the glimmer in her eyes as she tasted her harvest. I couldn't wait for my turn to taste those grapes. As an adult, I remember the joy I felt on those warm summer and fall days sampling the grapes on the vine. So for me, it became an adventure in helping people grow grapes for your home garden. There are several different types of grapes that you'll find. One of the grapes are your wine grapes, and those are often called European grapes. That's your Cabernet, your Chardonnay. There's also table or fruit grapes, which are often called American grapes. That's like your Concord grapes. I don't know if you remember the Concord grapes that most stores sold as grape juice. And your Nimrod grapes, which is an incredibly wonderful seedless green grape, which is just as wonderful. And then there's also the hybrid grapes. And oftentimes you'll hear them called the French grapes. The most common grapes that we sell here are both the table or fruit grapes or also the wine grapes. If you're interested in purchasing and growing wine grapes, I do recommend that you contact your local wineries to see what they're doing, what they found in your location that works as far as the particular wine grapes. As far as the table grapes, it's not as important to check out what grows in your area, because when you go to your local retailer that sells plants, that sells grapes, you'll find the best ones for your area. So when it comes to growing grapes, the question always is, where do I grow my grapes? Well, the first thing is that grapes need full sun. And what full sun means is that they need at least 6 hours of sun during the growing season, which is anywhere from mid-March, when they first start to bud out, until at least September, October. And you really won't get that full sun until May or June, and that's especially where you want to watch where you grow your grapes. The other is that grapes need a well-drained soil. What does that mean? That means that when it rains, that soil will percolate and the water will flow. It won't stay at the roots. Grapes do not like to have what I call wet feet. The other is that grapes need a pH of 5.8 or to 6.8. So that means that while it's slightly acidic, it's not as acidic as it normally is if you live in a location like I do, which is Northern Virginia. So what that means for me is if I want to actually grow grapes in my garden beds, I need to make sure that that pH is between 5.8 to 6.8, and I may need to amend the soil, which means I may need to put some lime down, because that lime will increase the pH. Same lime that you can use for your lawns, or you can use horticultural lime, which has a little bit of magnesium. The other thing that I like about grapes is that they are what I call self-pollinating. Some people like to call it self-fertile. What that means is technically you only need one grapevine to grow grapes. The more grapevines you have, the better it is. And the other thing is they can be the same cultivar. So you don't have to go out there looking for various different types of grapes to grow unless that's what you want. And the one thing I do recommend is be a little cautious if you have allergies to bees, because bees are totally attracted to the grapevines. The more bees you have, the better your grapes. So while they're self-fertile, self-pollinating, they love having the bees around for a pollinator. Also, the other thing with grapes, just like whether you're growing blueberries, blackberries, whether you're growing apples, whether you're growing peaches, it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years before you can really produce those grapes that are totally edible and juicy and just wonderful. But here's the interesting thing. Even if you're looking at container growing, yes, you can grow your grapes in containers. Grapevines will last for anywhere from 50, that's 50, years to 100 years. As long as they're pruned out, as long as they're thinned out properly, as long as they're in well-drained soil, they will last almost forever. And the other thing about grapes is sometimes when you get in a zone that's a little too warm, it could be a problem because you need at least 7 days during the winter where that temperature gets below freezing to be able to set the grapes. So I've already kind of given you a hint of where you can grow them. You can grow them in your garden bed. And the other is that you can grow grapes in containers. And it's really fascinating. I was talking to a friend just before starting to tape the show, and I was telling her how much I am getting, or how many people I'm getting asking the same question, which is, can I grow my grapes in containers? Yes. So we'll be talking about that a little later in this show. First, before we do that, I want to talk about what I call my little Charlie Brown tree. This is, Reliance is actually the name of this particular grape, and it lives up to its name. And this is what I am looking for when I'm looking for a brand new grape to plant. I want something that has one very, very strong stock. And why? Because in my first year, and I have, please excuse my artwork, I'm not pretending to be an artist. I'm definitely a horticulturalist, but I can't say for art. But if you take a look at this year one, you'll see that there's just one stalk. And that's really what you want. You also want something that has a graft point. So you're looking for, where is this grafted? So what that means, when I plant this grape shrub or grapevine, I am actually in the ground. I am actually going to plant it even with what I'm seeing. I'm not going to cover up either this area here, definitely not cover up there. You never want to cover up graft points whenever you're planting your grapevines. And the reason for that is that you'll end up with something different than what you thought. So you really need that graft point. You need to make sure, or graft union as it's on my diagram. So if I started getting during year one a lot of branches that came off this, I would actually already in year one start pruning them back. This, though, I'm not going to prune back because this is exactly what I'm looking for. Just that main leader, it's called, and a little bit of branching is fine. Now, the next is year two, when this is in the ground. And if you look at the year two, there's lateral branches called cordons. And these lateral branches by year three will be the branches that produce the right type of sprouts or spurs that will give you the fruit. So this is when you have these cordons, this is where if you have a trellis, you want to start training it to grow on the trellis. And then finally, the year 3, this is where you start seeing the fruit. This is where the grapes start coming. So what will happen is that you'll see these canes or these shoots or these spurs coming off that lateral branching. And that's where you'll start seeing the grapes coming. There are so many good university websites that just put in your search engine grapes for the home garden, and you will actually find, or pruning grapes for the home garden, site:/edu. And what you will find is a whole bunch come up. And if you don't know and can't figure it out, you can always email me at misty@burkenursery.com, and I'll be more than happy to let you send up some links as far as when it comes to the pruning. But if for some reason in year 1 or year 2 you start getting grapes, especially if those canes or those spurs start growing too quickly, you want to prune those grapes off. You really don't want to. And I know it's like, what? But I'm excited. Year 1, year 2, I'm getting grapes. Isn't that wonderful? No. You never want to get grapes before year 3 when it comes to your grapevines, because you want all that energy to go into the root system. And if the grapevine in the ground grows properly, its root system can go 3 feet deep. That's part of why it's so long-lived. So that's what you do when you're growing the grapes. Oh, and almost forgot something very important. Grapes, believe it or not, don't like a lot of fertilizer. Can you imagine? So when I first plant in the ground, or even if I'm planting in the pot, I'll use a little fertilizer that's like a 10, 10, 10, or 15, 15, 15. They call well-balanced fertilizers. So that's what I'll use. But after that, maybe fertilize once a year with fertilizer that has a lot of potassium, that's the middle number, or that has a lot of the potash, the last number. Grapes do not like nitrogen-related fertilizer, so stay away from, be cautious. When you read some kind of, this is really great for blooming, that usually means there's a lot of nitrogen in that fertilizer. It's not what you want for your grapes, whether they're in the ground or in the container. And containers. Let's talk about containers. I'm excited to share with you how you can plant grapevines in the containers so you can have them on your patio or you can have them on your deck. I am so excited that I can show you how to plant grapes in containers. So if you want them on your deck or if you want them on your porch, you can have them there. Or you may find, and this is one of the things that I found in my yard, that I have some sunny locations that are not quite in an area where it's easy to dig the soil, or where, well, in honesty, I live in an area where I have a lot of springs. So it's sometimes nice to be able to plant in containers, and then I can put them in the areas where the soil isn't that well drained, but still get a crop of plants that need well-drained soil. So what are the tools that you need if you're going to be planting your grapevines? Well, obviously a pot and potting mix. The one good thing about potting mix is that potting mix has a pH of anywhere from around 6.0 to 7.0, depending on the company or depending on how the company mixes its potting mix, how much limestone they put in it, how much perlite or vermiculite they put in it. And this potting mix, not just with this company, but any general potting mix, will work with your grapevines. What you don't want to do is you don't want to go out and you don't want to get the soil from your garden and put it in the container, because that will be too dense and you won't get the drainage that you need for your container and for the grapes. The other thing, drainage. Rocks are very important to put in the base of a pot. So let me step back a little here. The first thing is that with your pot, you want to make sure that it has drainage holes. So that means that the water can go through. You do not want to have a pot that has no drainage holes. That's step one. Step two, rocks. This is, if I were to look at the base of a pot, this is what it would look like. I prefer, when it comes to grapevines, to use the larger rocks. I've talked about drainage rocks and putting rocks in the base of pots before, and usually what I talk about, or usually the size of the rocks that I mention when I talk about putting them in pots, are really 1/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch or 1/2 an inch size. This size is more of 2 to 3 inch size, and this is what I prefer when I'm putting the rocks in for the grapevines. They provide better drainage. So then, step one is to take the rocks. These are too heavy to pick up. Right away and just dump the whole thing. But I'll take these rocks and I will put them in the bottom of the pot. There's no quiet way to do this. And so if you don't like noise, that can be a problem. But, you know, it can give you a little sound too. Give you a little music, so to speak. So that's step one, putting the rocks in the bottom of my pot. Step two is the potting mix. And the fact that your grapes really don't like a lot of fertilizer, I wouldn't add any fertilizer at this point at all. Instead, that's the other thing that you need to be a little careful. I didn't think to mention this, but some of the potting mixes now come with fertilizer in them. And if it's a little bit of fertilizer, what I call a balanced fertilizer, where all the numbers are the same, or if the second and the third number are higher, you're fine. Grapes don't like a lot of nitrogen, so you don't want to get potting mix that's high in nitrogen. That's your first number when you look at it. And usually if they have the number, usually the number is in the back of the bag. Now, when I first do this, I initially just fill this not all the way. And in general, you never fill a pot all the way to begin with. The reason is you always want to leave 1 to 2 inch lips so that way when it's time to water, you're able to water without it spilling all over the pot. But this is just general kind of potting when you're potting with something that may be a little larger, is sometimes it's easier just to get the soil not quite all the way, but so just initially maybe 2/3 of the way as opposed to all the way to the top, only because that'll be easier to put the plant in there. And then I'm going with the seedless grape Himrod. It's a green grape, it's seedless, it's a little on the tart side. Also, raisins can be made from this grape. I don't know. I mean, raisins, somehow you dry the grapes, but I don't have the recipe, so please don't ask me for the recipe when it comes to the grapes. And then this is what I like to call these saplings. I could, if I wanted, this is the Reliance, Reliant, I could also plant this in a pot if I wanted without a problem. But I like to start with the smaller grapevines for the pots. And again, you don't want to go with a pot that's too large. Once they get larger, like this size pot, then I will actually move to a larger size pot. So for this, which is a 1.5 gallon pot, I would go with a pot size that's 18 to 24 inches and 2 to 3 feet deep, because you want that grape to be able to develop the roots. But on a grape that is smaller, or grape sapling, seedling that's smaller, I don't want the pot too large, otherwise I'll have to water this pot so much that I'll overwater, and even if and I could possibly actually damage the roots by creating root rot. So, gently opening this up. And before I fully open it up, there's something else important that I have to show you. I showed you on the Reliant, but let me show you on the Himrod here. All grapes, no matter what the size, have the graft union. In this case, the graft union is right here. You don't want to plant over the graft union. That's very critical. You plant over the graft union, that will actually change the entire nature of this vine. So I am planting this now in here. And with these small ones, you need to be a little careful because sometimes the root ball just comes out. The soil is packed very, very loosely here. Now, this could be actually a blessing in disguise. What happened was that the soil fell apart totally from the roots. Don't panic if that happens. You're fine. These roots were packed properly. They're mature. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to rinse them off or anything. You just need to now be very cautious in how you transplant, so that you just want to be gentle in how you put in the soil in here, covering the roots without covering the graft. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, that also leads me to say that sometimes you can actually get bare rooted, make sure I'm not covering. So what I'm doing in this case, since that soil fell apart totally, is I'm looking for where the roots, the top roots are. That's right here. So that is where I'm going to stop. Maybe if so that's where I'm going to put the soil. I'm not going to go above that at all, because I don't want to accidentally get into the graft union here. And the other, when you're planting in a pot, especially with potting mix, the potting mix gives you the well-drained soil that you want, so that part's good. But if you have a deck that's windy, or if it's a windy day, this could conceivably fall over, and meaning the whole thing could fall over. So you don't want to do that. So what you want to do is your first year, you just want to stake it like this, and then just take a tie and tie it around. Now, in the second year, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in 2 stakes, and then I'll put a tie in here, and I'll get my lateral roots growing this way. And then third year, I will just take a look and see if this maybe needs to be transplanted, or if it can stay here 1 more year. And there you have it, your grapevine ready for the deck or the patio. So there's something meditative about growing grapevines and harvesting vines. To shape your vines through pruning, to give them more energy for growth, this can really bring out your reflective nature. You may even find it amazing that growing grapevines in containers is not a difficult process. It just takes time to achieve your results. Grapes that peer through the leaves waiting to bring joy to your palate. I'm your host, Misty Kuceris. Contact me at misty@burkenursery.com if you have other questions regarding the care of grapes or related to gardening in general. There's also several excellent university resources on growing grapes at home. I'm happy to provide those links to those resources as well. Thank you for spending your time with me here at Gardening with Burke Nursery. I'm looking forward to helping you grow your garden.
Funding for this program is made possible by Burke Nursery and Garden Center in Burke, Virginia. You'll find trees and shrubs, perennials and annuals, water garden supplies, houseplants, and bird and gardening supplies. Burke Nursery also provides landscape, plant diagnostic, and installation services, and much more. For more information, you can check out their website or call 703-323-1188.